Welcome, everyone. Today we have beautiful Cheryl Beck joining us. Cheryl is a courageous survivor and whistleblower who has been speaking out and raising awareness for decades. As a child, along with her sister, she was sold into government and CIA programs and endured just horrific abuse within her own family, corporations like Disney, as well as having other powerful abusers involved in her story, including Michael Aquino, Joseph Mengele, and even the Rothschild family. So personally, as a survivor, I just learned so much from Cheryl's testimony. It really highlights just how the programming is so scripted and virtually identical all across the world, with Cheryl's childhood being in the USA and mine in a little city in South Australia called Adelaide. So today we are going to hear some of Cheryl's incredible story, and I specifically reached out to Cheryl and just invited her to come along and share how she worked with her part. So she's just done such an incredible job of reintegrating. She has a beautiful story of her journey of remembering the challenges, and she shares that so vulnerably, and really shows how the healing that we have available to us through Jesus gives us this incredible opportunity of being able to heal ourselves rather than having to always, look to a third party or look to a psychologist or counselor. I think, especially in these times where there's so much more information at hand for survivors, it's something that we can, really do ourselves, or a lot of it ourselves, in the safety of our homes, which I think is very empowering and puts the power back on us. So welcome, Cheryl. It's so wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Gabby.
You are so welcome. Perhaps to start, just for people that haven't heard your story before, would you be able to give us just a bit of an overview of like how it was growing up, and even like how the penny dropped, like how you first became aware that maybe something was amiss and your memory started to break through?
Sure. I was born into what is called a bloodline, Luciferian or Illuminati family. We had to go to a Lutheran church, and my father chose one in the city next to our city, and we went there. And my mom had been brought up in a spiritualism household with her mother. So she was introduced to Jesus in Vacation Bible School when she was 5 years old. Yay. So she had that planted in her. So when our father decided that we needed to join the Lutheran church, I was 2 and my older sister was 4. And we went there and they told me the story about Jesus. And I immediately grabbed on to Jesus. Somebody loved me. Uh, Somebody will have a place for me in this place called heaven. That sounded just wonderful. I'm at 2 years old, you're already abused in these families. It starts before your birth even. And so when they told me this story, it was like, yes. And they baptized me and my sister, and we joined the Lutheran church. The Lutheran church was just a front for the family. And you didn't really hear the gospel in the church, and they had the old hymns and things, but I loved it. And we had to go to Sunday school. And then in the evenings, we'd take a drive out. We called it the Long Windy Road Drive. And we'd go out there most Sundays for this long windy road drive about sunset. I didn't remember anything as far as going to this place, but coming back, it was a long windy road. So that's why we nicknamed it the Long Windy Road back home. I don't remember ever driving to it, but in that time, that's when they did the Antichrist type programming, where they want you to deny Jesus. And so whatever we learned in Sunday school that morning, they knew, because it was the family running this church. So they would take what we learned that morning and twist it all up and torture us for our beliefs in Jesus. Then also in our life, my step grandfather was OSS CIA, and he was my father's handler. Therefore, he had my father sign my older sister, and I up for MK Ultra and the Monarch program. He received $200 a month per child from a quote unquote Monarch life insurance company for putting us in the program and handling us all and making sure things were correct as far as the things going on at home to be conducive to the Monarch programming. So went through that as well. Both the family and MK Ultra used me as a sex slave, most of all, seductress, blackmailing child, and the altar was named Sexy Sadie. And it's interesting, I'm talking to you down there in Australia. I had a friend, a man that lived in Perth, and he also had Sexy Sadie programming.
Wow.
So our CIA was connected with Australia, who was connected with the Tavistock Institute in UK, and they were all this one big happy. And of course, Montreal, McGill University, where you and Cameron and all those nice, wonderful perpetrators were in my life too. So I went through some experiments there with you and Cameron, and I went through an experiment in MK Ultra where they blew my hearing. They were testing noise thresholds, and I was in a padded 1960s radio quiet room. The walls were actually padded, and I looked up and there were two windows at the top of the room, and they just blasted noise in the speakers in that room to the point that I went into convulsions. I had blood running out of my ears, nose, mouth, eyes, and that cost me more than 50% of my hearing permanently in both ears in the conversational range. I had been a talking child before that. My mom was programmed by them to only call the paperclip Nazi pediatrician that we had and tell him, with all the symptoms that were going on. And so there was another doctor in the practice, but she would only talk to him because he was, quote unquote, the best doctor in California. And so he would always assure her that our complaints were either hypochondria, because we're whiny crybaby children. With my going silent, he said I was reacting to her having another baby and things like that. When that wasn't the truth, I was actually very deaf at that point. So much so that in kindergarten, I had to go through speech therapy because my speech was like somebody who was deaf, because it really took most of my hearing to begin with and kind of healed back a little bit to 50%. So I had to go through speech therapy.
Cheryl, how old were you like when they did the experiment with the hearing and you basically
Two or three.
So young.
2 or 3. Yeah. They'd already deemed me as an expendable child, that they take your astrology, your astrological chart, your birth date, the gematria of your name, put it all together, take it to the local oracle, who's basically a witch that has her spirits that she talks to determine your destiny. And at 2 years old, the local witch determined that I was an expendable, and my older sister was to be an oracle. And that was later confirmed. That was later confirmed 2 years later as the family gathered on the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. there's this huge family gathering, so huge it was in this large airport hangar. And then that oracle also said I was an expendable too. So I shouldn't be alive. I should have died somewhere along the way. That's how lethal the experiments they put me in were. So they didn't care the damage that has happened to my body, which is quite extensive, but that's for another time. So things are not normal. You know, when you grow up in it, you don't know that other kids don't have all the voices talking in their head like I would, you know, with the alters having different opinions about different things. I had an internal matron who would tell me what a horrible, nasty child I was all the time, constantly. I thought I was a bad child, even though I wasn't, because of this constant narrative going in my head of an altar I created to keep myself in line so I didn't get, you know, tortured or punished or whatever. So those two things were going on. And then the constant trauma at home with my father being a pedophile and a brutal one at that. So he also trafficked me himself. And then I was trafficked in the family. The family was friendly families, not with the Rothschilds, but the Rockefellers.
Oh,
And
really?
so I was trafficked to the Rockefeller compound in New York for a long weekend. David Rockefeller was one of my perpetrators there. It's so weird when you look at these places you've never been and know that you've been there. And the way I could tell for some of the more famous perpetrators, if their face came up on TV, I was in the next room before it registered what I was looking at, their face or whatever. You know, they just creeped me out so bad. And there was a show on. It was In the Sleep Room, based on you and Cameron's experiments. And when the actor in his Scottish brogue said to the little girl, "Well, how are you today, lassie?" That's exactly how Cameron spoke. And and this was before I had much memory. I found myself running across my living room. I jumped in a rocking chair and spun around. It was a spinning rocking chair. And I spun around and I'm peering over the top. And I'm going, while my logical brain is going, what are you doing? You know, because I didn't have that full memory yet. But wow, you know, I was researching, I was looking into this stuff because things were, you know, weird. So
It's incredible how your body can just have that huge response when seeing a perpetrator and your memories aren't even there yet. So isn't it just so very telling? And I thought it was interesting how you were just mentioning about all the voices in your head. And I think for survivors, often like looking back, we can be like, oh, it was like we had a lot of negative self-talk, but in reality, so much of that was actually programmed to keep us in line as well.
we have to adopt our perpetrators to survive better, because our goal as victims was to survive in the best possible way and avoid punishment and torture. So we adopt. I know I had my own internal hair doctor, my Nazi paperclip doctor inside. I had the matron who was actually his Nazi nurse that worked with him inside. And, it was just so you'd never do anything out of line that would bring attention to yourself or, subject you to the torture. And then you mentioned Disneyland. My father only bought these old jalopy cars to keep us in a 3-mile radius growing up.
What's a jalopy car? I'm not
A
familiar with
jalopy, a used, falling apart, barely functioning car.
We call them a
Now, he
bob.
had a good job. He had a good job, but that was to keep us in a 3-mile radius in our city. And it was always his buddies, which was his Masonic brothers, that would offer him a car for $200 or $400. That was the max he would pay for a car, was $400. So, and that was done purposely to keep us well under control in that city, because the whole city was a viper's nest of the family, of the mafia, of two large pedophile rings. I mean, it wasn't just one pedophile ring, it was two or three. The police department was involved in the pedophile ring. I was used in their, they made porn films. The police on their own made porn films with me. I was used in kiddie porn and prostitution, of course, too, because expendables are used as favors to other friendly families, like the Rockefellers. You're trafficked to, I was trafficked to George H.W. Bush in Colorado. And so they do that, exchanging their fresh meat, expendable kids, to be used, as they would call us. They would stuff us in wire dog cages. And this is 1960s wire dog cages, so the ends were really raw. So they would just stack us in the back of trucks. And some didn't even survive being transported, but that was okay to them because we were just expendable. And I remember, the long journey to Colorado from California. That was the most horrendous trafficking experience.
That would be a few days, wouldn't it?
Well, if it's a straight drive, it would be less than 24 hours.
Right.
But with all the shifting and things, like the kids in the cages at the bottom, you've got all the body fluids, and the kids in the bottom didn't make it, and when you arrive, if you're all scratched up and everything, they don't care, because you're an expendable. You're just, coming to that ritual, and you may live or you may die depending on what role you're playing in that ritual. So, I always had body complaints, of course.
Yeah.
And my doctor would tell my mom that I was a hypochondriac crybaby. In actuality, 2/3 of the bones in my bodies have been fractured, dislocated, or broken, and significant injuries that were never even X-rayed by him. He would just tell my mom I was being a hypochondriac. When my father broke my neck at age 7, he said I had a strained muscle, and I was given baby aspirin for all these injuries. So it was just a miracle of God. I grew up on the Pacific Ocean and spent a lot of time in the water. And I think God used that as part of my healing of these injuries, because that was my safe place, was in the water. And because otherwise being a retired nurse now, I have no idea how I survived the injuries that I did. And my doctors are the same way. They're like, they look at my x-rays, and when I had the MRIs, and they're just like, how did you survive?
Yeah. Well, you're a miracle, Cheryl, just to make it through all that.
Yeah, all of Jesus, to, be the glory for keeping me here. I had a lot of near-death experiences as a child, but I didn't. When you grow up in this, you don't know that's unusual either. I would tell my mom I flew with the angels, and she would think it was a dream. Of course, what else do you call it? It was just a dream. It was just a dream. We're all programmed that way. It's just a dream.
I think so much gets put under that whole topic, doesn't it? Just anything that is just unprocessable in this kind of family. And just remember, like, everyone in the family has been abused and programmed to a degree as well. So they're all going to dissociate. So it's just so easy for things to get categorized as it's a dream, or the doctor said it's okay. And if you're not from this kind of family, you just be like, how could that ever happen? But when everyone is programmed and everyone is finding it easier to dissociate rather than dealing with the pain of the truth, it's amazing just how things can get written
And the
off.
drugs they use, back in the 60s, LSD was popular, and I've had lots of LSD trips as a child. I describe them as Dumbo's pink elephants on parade with Disney. That those scenes, because it's kind of the same thing I experienced on the LSD. Looking back, it's so easy to see that I knew something was wrong as a child and was expressing it without talking. Because if you tell, you're going to get killed, or you're going to get your family killed first. That's the draconian law that they use. They start with the youngest member of your family and kill them in front of you, and then progress to the oldest, and they kill them all. And then before they kill you, to inflict the worst suffering upon you. So you always have that threat. And then they play it out once, and like, I told my granny that my cousins were not safe around my father. That's all I said. That was enough to have them fake the draconian law. I thought they had killed when they were injecting my mom and my sister with some kind of drug, So I thought they had killed them, and they told me they'd killed them because I told Granny, and Granny, of course, told my father. So anyhow, yeah, that kind of system, you don't talk, and you try to express what's going on, but everything is always dismissed. I have drawings from kindergarten that I did that was trying to tell people too, where psychologists that are trained in doing the pictures that kids draw, they're just like, it's right here, it's right here. So anyhow,
Times it should have been picked up, right? Like, but then I guess, with these families, they have control of all the institutions around them, like from the dentist to the doctor to any therapist to the schools. So, if they don't own the person doing the therapy, they've got someone there that they can, take control of the situation with. So just so many tentacles with these groups. And I think you were starting to explain about your family's connections to Disney, and then we started getting going into a different area. I would love to hear about that as well.
So yeah, so with the rent-a-wreck cars that we had, my father and my paternal grandmother took my sister and I up to Disneyland by train. And when we got back, my sister and I had very little memories, but they took pictures of us, being at the rides and stuff, on the posing in front of the rides, but we had no memory of that entire day. Well, what happened was they took us down into Club 33, and everybody says, oh, it's just a bar. Well, no, it's underground, and they have bedrooms farther back. They have secret doors and all that kind of stuff, where the clients of Club 33 could exercise their pedophile pleasures with you. And that happened to me. Also, the one time, this one particular time, when my father and my grandmother, now his paternal grandparents, of course, were active participants in this. My first memory ever in my life was of her molesting me, changing my diaper. So I have a phobia of women that have long red fingernails. I immediately scream witch inside, and that's all I remember was these long red fingernails, and I'm kicking my feet real hard. Anyhow, so she was an active participant, and what happened in this particular one was they took my sister and I via the tunnels to another building outside of Disneyland. And it was a high-rise building, and on the inside they had a mock-up pyramid without the capstone on that I would say would be about 12 feet high or so. On the top of it, they had a satin pillow with a dead white cat on it. I didn't know the cat was dead, but eventually I figured it out that because it didn't move. And then they had, of course, they took our clothes, and then they separated my sister and I, and they all dressed up in Egyptian regalia. And my grandmother was actually a daughter of Nefertiti in the Masonic system, and so this is this big pageant, and they bring in this man, the honoree, who gets to rape me on the side of the pyramid. And I'm probably 5, I think. And all the women they have, Egyptian necklaces and things like that, but they're mostly naked. And he has a flowing robe on, but he's naked, and they're just, rubbing on him and stuff as he's walking and gets to the place of honor where I'm, strapped to the side of the pyramid. And he rapes me in this Egyptian ritual in honor of Bastet, the Egyptian goddess.
That's a cat goddess as well, isn't it? So that's interesting that the cat was on that
Yeah,
pyramid. I'm just intrigued, with the Egyptian theme, but I guess it's so popular within these occult groups like the Freemasons as well, isn't it?
yeah. There's actually levels up in the Freemasons. The daughter of Nefertiti. I don't exactly know where in the Eastern Star that is, but I think it's higher than the normal, routine levels that they go through. But I did see a photograph once of her dressed in the Egyptian regalia, and my sister has that photograph. So that happened later on when I was researching my life. I opened a book and it fell open to a picture, and it was the same man. And I'm in,
Isn't
hang
that
on
God
just
just bringing you something you needed to know, right?
right. So the book fell open to a page of a photograph of a man. I'm in my college library, and all of a sudden I go into a spin program. The room starts spinning because I'm not supposed to recognize this person. And it was um, George Hunter White. He was an LSD CIA operative. He was like part of those experiments in MK Ultra where they had the prostitutes come in and they would watch what happened with
Mm.
the subjects and everything. That's who that man was
Oh.
in that ritual.
So he's in at Disney in this 33 club room. Golly. And
This was outside of Disney in some building. It was a clear, um, had a lot of windows in it, high rise. So there's tunnels under Disney, but they also went out to surrounding, streets and buildings. Um, so that happened at Disneyland. And there were times we'd go where I'd remember doing things there at Disney. And then there were the other times that didn't. And I attribute that to the bedroom happenings in Club 33 in the underground there. They also used Disney movies as programming. And
they
so you have a
right.
Sleeping Beauty altar or Cinderella altar, or whatever they want to use. And they pick up different scripts from movies, books, whatever they want to use as the narrative they're going to program an altar with. They also use the Disney movies. Disney movies in themselves are traumatic.
Absolutely.
You think about all the movies where the mom and dad are dead, or the mom gets killed, or the dad gets killed, and the child's an orphan. Think of it's like the same thing in every Disney movie. The child's an orphan. Um,
And there's always a
and
witchcraft, a witch and magic, right?
witchcraft
In
and magic,
everyone. Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And they are intentionally traumatizing the child. And you see these movies in the holidays. You know, they put them out every holiday here in the USA, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. They'll put out the classic Disney movies for everybody to binge watch on vacation, and that just reprograms people by being exposed to it.
Absolutely. God,
Uh,
Disney's just so evil. And I know it's been really hard, like, because I've been raising awareness about Disney and I'll still get mothers and they'll really get upset about it because it's something that they've used in their family. And I think, we've just got to be open to learning. Because, when you look into what Disney is set up for, these programmers, they just wanted to have a place that they could take both the pedophiles and all the children, the generational children, to be programmed that wasn't the military bases because there was too much was getting noticed. And just to think that as a society through our pop culture, families are just accepting to play these same movies to, their children that are being used in programming. It's just it's so awful. It's just such a cunning deception, isn't it?
yes, it is. And we would watch The Wonderful World of Disney. You know, every Saturday night it would be on for us to watch, and we watched it religiously. And my mom would also have us watch scary movies on Saturday mornings. And literally, my sister and I would be hiding behind the couch and peering up with these scary movies. Like, they scared me to death, like Medusa and all these old 60s films. And one particular one, The Bad Seed. And they were putting that program in me that I'm a bad seed, I'm an expendable. And what the bad seed, the girl, she's a stereotypical type altar they use, and it's of the German blonde haired blue eyed girl with the braided hair down both sides. That was the bad seed. And so that was used recurring in my programming through the years of different experiences with a girl that would look like that, and different traumas that went on. It was just to fully persuade me that I'm bad, that I'm this evil seed. They wanted me to be a seductress assassin, and I wouldn't kill. No matter, I drugged the guy, but I wouldn't kill him. I failed that programming. So at 12, they decided they were going to sacrifice me because I wouldn't go through with killing the assignment. But an interesting thing happened. I was I I was leaky in my programming, and so I came very conscious, and I attribute that to Jesus saving my life multiple times. And so I came to consciousness, and I was supposed to walk from the house, and they had all the kids that they were going to harm, you know, in the ritual in the house with me, little smaller kids. And I just have this mama bear part of me. I've always had it, where they knew they couldn't threaten my life, but if they threatened another child, I couldn't handle it. So I was supposed to walk out to the barn and go to my sacrifice, and I didn't do it. Instead, I started attending to the little kids and opening the bedroom windows and stuff and helping them get out, and told them to run back to their cars. It was a very isolated farm they used for the kiddie porn and the rituals and things like that. So, like, run to your cars, go hide in your cars because there's no place else to go. Um, or hide near your car, in the bush. But so I didn't go out. And they sent in the butcher, who was a butcher by trade in our supermarket.
Mm.
And back in those days, in the supermarkets, they'd have the open window where you'd see all the butchered cows hanging on the racks and stuff. And talk about a double programming. And then in the circle, he was also the butcher. And, he was known for torturing with his knife. And so they sent him in to get me. Well, I had been programmed as a seductress. And so what I did was I turned in, he came in, well, should I start with your eyes? Should I start with this? Should I start with that? And so I turned into this seductress, and oh, that's so exciting. Why don't you, start with a little cut here? And I'm so excited and everything. And I managed to get the knife away from him, and I plunged it into the back of his neck.
Wow.
And rolled him off me and onto the floor, and he's bleeding to death. That was probably a fatal wound, but I was like panicked, like somebody help him. Well, hair doctor walks in to see what the delay has been. And as soon as he opens the door, I start screaming at him, save his life, save his life. I didn't mean to kill him. I was just horrified that it happened like that. And he just crossed his arms and smiled. Well, 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 I guess we can use you after all.
Wow.
And he let him die. And
He wasn't
his,
concerned at all about the doctor. I mean, the butcher, I should say.
yeah. And so that's when, yeah, they decided to use me in a, rather than the seductress assassin role, to put me in other roles. At the same time, the family, I was being bred to have the baby. My father needed a perfect male baby to sacrifice to move him up into the hierarchy. And my mom only had girls, and she miscarried the boys. And yes, we know they were boys. People question me on this miscarriage thing, but my father had a positive blood type and my mom had a negative, and so we had the Rh factor going on too. So when you have a girl with the XX, that helps compensate for that Rh, where if it's XY, it doesn't. Anyhow, so I was used as a breeder. My first baby I had at 12 was a girl. And of course, my father needed a boy. And so he was just livid. He was just unglued. They had married me to a 13-year-old boy.
So awful that, within a family that they will use the children of the children. Do you know what I mean? I hear it happening so often. It just goes to show how all life is just treated as something that can be used towards
Right.
their power
Commodity.
and their advancement. It's awful, Cheryl.
Yeah. And so anyhow, they had married me to a 13-year-old boy and in a cult ritual. And so then we had to go through a cult divorce. And they told me with the baby that they were going to, the paternal grandparents were going to keep her and raise her as their own. And that didn't happen. So I don't know what happened to her. I thought maybe they would probably sell her on the black market or trade her to another family for a favor or something like that. So I just don't have any idea what happened to her. And then at 15, I had the baby boy. I carried him full term at 15, and they induced labor on the fall equinox. Took him to the doctor's house because he had a big foster care because he was such a wonderful pediatrician, right? So of course he'd have foster babies in and out all the time, and so they took him to his house. I never got to see him, never got to touch him. When I delivered him, the room erupted into applause and cheers, and they're planning his death. And I'm on the table. I started screaming and trying to roll off the table. And my father ran up to me, goes, "Oh, I forgot and he did whatever it was to put me out, the altar out, you know.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Um and then they kept him 3 months and they sacrificed him Christmas Eve, Christmas Day at the stroke of midnight. And my paternal grandmother had flown out to be there to see her son ascend and everything like that. That was the most horrific memory that I had. That was the very final one. Um, but in my life, I've always had a weight problem because they were giving me hormones and things like that too. I was getting allergy shots at the doctor's practice, of course. And so he could put anything in those shots he wanted to. So I literally went from being a little girl to develop like practically overnight and pregnant, which
Right.
we just thought I was fat. But my mom, when she was awake for a while out of the programming, she said, I thought you were pregnant at that age. It's like, but you didn't have a boyfriend. So,
There were so many other explanations for it. It's so interesting, isn't it?
yeah. And then, I got fat again and when I was 15, and then I lost after that. I became anorexic and I lost all the baby weight plus some, because of your soul and your spirit knows something's amiss, right? So anyhow, and when that happened at 15, the SRA, the family was done with me because I had been a troublemaker because I had Jesus living in me, and I would come to sometimes during rituals and bind them in the name of Jesus.
Wow.
And they would, this one ritual, they froze like mannequins. And I got the kids that were making up the circle and I away from the circle. They laid us naked head to feet to make a circle rather than just have it drawn on the ground. And
Oh,
so Satan has no grace or mercy. I came to, I bound them, they froze. I was 8 years old. I got all the other kids awake and we all ran back to our cars because we're in the forest, and we're watching because they're frozen like mannequins. It was so weird. And then the demons that they'd summoned came up and beat the living crap out of them all. And
I guess the demons didn't get fed, did they? They didn't get what they wanted that day, so they wouldn't have been happy.
no, and of course, the circle has to remain intact. You don't break the circle.
Witchcraft circle, yes.
So
Wow.
yeah, that was an interesting thing. A lot of times I would have memories and like what I called my full color dreams. I was so impressed that I had these full living color dreams at times, and they were actually memories of places and occurrences. I had trouble in high school remembering my locker combination and where my locker was. Sometimes it would be, I wouldn't even remember what classes I was assigned to in high school because you switch, in high school, you have to go to different classes for, go all over the campus. And so after the rituals or programming, they'd always give me electric shock, and that to dissolve your short-term memory of things. So it would be like I just went to sleep Friday and it's Monday morning already. Didn't I just go to sleep? And I'd be mad because I was always tired, always, always, always tired. And it was so weird. And so I'd have to go to the office. Sometimes I'd have to get the school map, and they just thought, I was just this problem kid coming there to, make them work and get the combos and stuff like that. But I, honest to God, couldn't remember. And I can remember, you know, um, I read the newspaper and I can remember that same phenomena. It was like, I just read the paper Friday and I'm looking at Monday's paper.
And I
So
I
Really?
imagine the school might have even been like, oh, this person's like a little bit slow or on drugs, etc. And you're a gifted child. You're incredibly
Right.
intelligent. And it's just reminding me, like I remember when I was in primary school, it would be like it was almost like you would be coming to school like on a Monday or after things had been happening, and you're just in a completely different persona. So it was like as if you could remember people's names or what was going on. And I remember actually having to concentrate in primary school, like, okay, I need to remember this. So I need to put it into the right part of my brain. Like, what it's not normal for a child, but the thing is, this is all coping strategies because we're just trying to function in like families that are just so dysfunctional.
Right. Were you in a gifted program? We should mention this because a lot of people are starting to wake up. The normies are really starting to wake up to what happened. I was put in MGM. Um, a lot of people talk about the GATE program here in the United States. It was a later program, but it started off with MGM, mentally gifted minors.
Wow.
And they did an IQ test on me before I went into kindergarten. And it was down at the school headquarters. And I was doing the IQ test. And there's a part where you put colored blocks together in patterns. And I just had one done after I had brain damage to see where the brain damage was in my brain. So I kind of know the flow of how it went. So we're here and I'm doing the blocks. He goes, "You're just the smartest little girl I've ever seen." And for 5 years of my life, all I heard for compliments was sarcasm and that I was going to get punished after that sarcasm and showing how dumb I was. So I got mad at the testing man for, being sarcastic with me and saying that. So I messed up on purpose with the blocks. I was
Wow.
done. Yeah, I was passive aggressive really well. and um, and I still tested in the top 3%. So I was put in that program. And um, a lot of what happened in MGM, I don't remember. There's a few things I remember, but it was always a classroom that was kind of off, to the side in the school where they could access the gifted kids and take us, for their tests and whatever they were doing to us back then. Field trips, the same thing. One of the instructors had a mobile home this was early 70s that he would load us kids into and take us for field trips in a little RV. So what actually happened, I'm not sure. And I know the last instructor I had was former naval intelligence. He was a pedophile. He was having an open relationship with a high schooler, senior girl. I mean, former naval intelligence teaching MGM. What could possibly go wrong? It was just,
The things they got away with, right? And like these programs just seem to be such an easy way for them to access gifted children. And we know they want children with a higher IQ for the mind control projects because it means that they can add more sophisticated programming. So it all serves them. But yeah, in Australia, a lot of survivors are put into those kind of programs and that they're under Mensa, so the Mensa group. Or there's also another program that they do with gifted, and a lot of it's under the scholarship program. So we have like scholarships to get you into high schools and universities and primary schools actually that they test all the kids for like across the state almost so they can really go in and work out exactly what they want. And
oh,
yeah, then they get shuffled apparently, by ranking into whichever, schools and universities they want to send you to. So that happened to me and I got sent to a Methodist high school, which was definitely in with the programming. And the scholarships under like it's called the Duke of York scholarship. So it's all under like the Queen and the nobility families. So Tavistock, yeah, pushing us through the uni. So yeah, it's so cunning.
right. And they had me, of course, on the college prep accelerated, type classes that I had to take. What was interesting when I was 15, after the baby, And all my SRA alters died with the mom, because when she saw what happened to her baby, she laid down on the ground and died. So all those altars got put away into death, which was just asleep, you know.
Wow.
So what happened was I totally changed host personalities. Before I had been selective mute, you wouldn't know I was in the classroom, you know, things like that. Going along with the program, taking the classes. I was studying German because my family spoke German, but nobody in my day life family spoke German. But I
Interesting.
said that, you know, weird things like that that I never paid attention to. Looking in hindsight, it was like, duh, you know, because we had to speak German in the rituals and stuff to the elders and things like that. So, and at the same time, my mom divorced my father finally. Yes. And he was out of the house. And so,
Wow, so much happens all at the same time.
right. And
I
I had lost 65 pounds. I got to cut, they made us wear, when they were breeding us, long hair parted in the middle. So I cut my hair really super short. And I came back to my junior year in high school and nobody recognized me. I
Wow.
was outgoing and bubbly and had short hair and I was athletic and all these hidden things a part of me was, and nobody recognized. And I totally changed my class schedules and took the classes that I wanted to take, which was great. The last 2 years of high school were the only years I ever enjoyed in school, you know, as far as peers and being able to interact and do the things I wanted. So I totally blew off college. I wasn't going to go to college because that's what my father wanted. And it was interesting. I get this invitation in my senior year that I had won a scholarship, and I hadn't applied for any scholarships because I wasn't going to college.
Yeah.
So we get there and we're there that night, and the scholarship I got was from the funeral home that
Wow.
they use to hide the bodies and cremate the bodies. They do, you know, two things with the bodies. Well, as far as removing them from a scene and getting rid of them, they would put them in an already dug hole, you know, for a casket, fill it up to a level, and then put the, you know, somebody's casket over the body, or they would cremate them there. So I get a scholarship from this place for $150, and the message was, now you're going to die. It was crazy.
Mm. And so
So,
your life just really changed massively once, I guess, because your father was such a one of the main perpetrators and abusers in your life once he was out. And then like once he left, because he left from your family, so from your mom and your sisters, did that kind of allow then for you guys to, I guess, begin remembering and begin deprogramming somewhat because he wasn't constantly there enforcing?
no, actually, no. Because I was still being used in MK Ultra. We lived right by a military base, so that's, you know, where they access from. So I was still being used in MK Ultra, and so that programming and that those altered amnestic walls were still in place.
And I think that's important too, Cheryl, for survivors to grasp too, is like each survivor can be sold into multiple projects. So like there's what your family plans on using you for, potentially what the government did, the CIA, other cult groups as well. So even though your father was out, you're still being accessed.
Right. And he was just across town. We're still in that little 3 mile area that I talked about. He's just in an apartment in town. And my little sister was prized by him because she was a chosen one. She had his blue eyes. And so I would have to take her to visitations to go stay with him. And he kind of, he had two what they called nervous breakdowns back in the day, but his programming had broken down once when I was 6, and now at the divorce time. And I took my little sister over there, and I went to pick her up, and my father, after I got her out the door, grabbed me around my neck. The voices are telling me to kill you, and so I'm going to
He
kill
said
you.
that to you. Oh,
Yeah, he had me around in a headlock, and I had my keys in my hand. I gave it to my little sister. I said, "Run to the car, open the car door, get in the car, stick these in the ignition," because he's holding on to me, and I'm like, "I'll be there." I was going to get her out of there somehow. I'll be there in just a minute, because I had been trained in Mortal Kombat too. And I was also a lifeguard, and I was trained in getting out of headlocks. So she ran down the stairs and ran to the car, locked all the doors except the driver's. And I got out of that hold and knocked him backwards and knocked him on his butt. And then tore, down to the car,
yeah.
got in the car, locked the door, and
Praise God.
yeah, tried to get he had, it was a dead end street, and my car is facing, unfortunately, the dead end where the railroad tracks were, and there was no way I was going to make it over the railroad tracks in that jalopy car. And so anyhow, I managed to turn around real fast, and as we're coming up the road to leave, he runs out and the road is trying to get us to stop. I was like, I gunned it, and he just got out of the way at the last minute. And yeah, and that was the last time she ever visited him, thank God, because he was abusing her um, on the visits. So I had nothing to do with him. My older sister didn't. We'd always hated him. And my little sister was special. She was chosen, and even my mom treated her, she anything she asked for, she got. Where my older sister and I, we'd have to shop for our clothes at a thrift store, and oh, here's some Budweiser shirts and some jeans, and we got little things for Christmas. She got a color TV, so it was just very distinct that she was the chosen one.
He was right.
But
She
at
was ranked above.
18, yeah, but at 18, after I graduated high school, we sold. My mom got the house in the divorcement. He got to keep his retirement. And God told my mom to move, to get out of there. And so we sold everything, bought a motorhome, and took off into the wilderness, back roads of the USA, and ended up, unfortunately, close to where, she was born and raised, and also he was born and raised, which meant we're going from one viper's nest to another.
So at
But we had
this stage, as a family, just to kind of understand, at this stage, you knew that he was abusive, like the father was abusive. Had anyone remembered any like sexual abuse, etc., or it was more just he was very violent at home?
Yeah, not the sexual abuse, and he wasn't physically violent in front of my mom.
Mm.
But he'd do things like, my mom was a Stepford wife. She was always cooking or cleaning, and cooking or cleaning and doing everything for him, making him a special dinner. We ate fish sticks and chips, as you would say, fish and chips, and they would have a nice dinner, and they would eat later, so he didn't have to be around the kids at the table. So anyhow,
So literally, you guys took off knowing something was wrong, but not really knowing the depths of it.
now, and what's interesting, the last neighborhood we were in, it was like all the kids hung out together, and not our house, but the house next door was the kid hangout house, the anchor home, as so to speak. And the other kids in the neighborhood, their fathers were retired Marines, and their houses were just as violent and dysfunctional And then my father trafficked me to the father next door. So there was no picking up on, like, my programmer, Dr. Green, would come in his van that was equipped with equipment to torture and things like that, and pick me up and go. And then we were also taken out of the house in the middle of the night, chloroformed, with this, and taken out of the house for rituals and stuff. And my mom and my father would always have coffee together in the evening. And I thought that was such a nice, where they were nice and civil to each other and everybody was getting along, and mom and dad are having their after dinner coffee. Well, he put drugs in the coffee. So I had a picture of my mom just totally just passed out, sitting up, so we could be taken out of the house. He would get home from work and he would take a nap.
I'm just
And
I'm just still processing just the Dr. Green with a mobile mind control station, like the things they think of, right?
right, there's electric shock in there. He
Drugs.
eventually graduated to a cab over camper truck thing. The weirdest thing happened to me when I was anorexic. Of course, I exercised all the time too. And so I went for a run at the public park. And with the thought in my mind that I have to lose 3 pounds by Monday. I thought that was just my thought. I have to lose 3 pounds by Monday. So I make the loop around the park. I've been about a mile, and there's this nice looking man sitting at the picnic table as I'm coming back to the start. And he looks at me and goes, "So, you going to lose 3 pounds by Monday?" And I stood there in shock. It's like, how did he know my thought? Right? Well, he had programmed me with that.
Grandma.
And
Wow.
then I get to my car, and there's this witch looking woman with this long stick, and she's doing this dance on this circle. And my car's parked like it's behind her. I have to get to the other side of this crazy looking witch woman. And she's invoking powers, and so I go to my car and I open the door, and she's coming towards me. And then the next thing I know, it's after dark and I'm getting in my car to go home.
Wow.
That was Dr. Green that was sitting at that table. And he had his mobile thing right there. She was the distraction. He came up from behind me, did his grips and triggers, and took me to. And my mom was so mad at me because we had one car, and I had used the car to get to this park to go running, and we didn't have cell phones back in those days, so I couldn't tell her I was going to be late. And I was in so much trouble, for that. And he had just taken me and done his thing with me at that park. And I got home and got in double trouble. So,
Just
but
can't.
those things going on.
Wow.
But and the other weird thing, when we were trying to escape Carlsbad, California, my mom had all these people in our life. Like, one old school teacher of mine came up to her in the grocery store, told her how stupid it was for her to think of leaving Carlsbad and moving. And then she had the pastor come to the door, and our pastor, remember, this is the family church, right? So he was a hypnotist. So he came in to try and hypnotize her out of moving, and all these random people would just come up to her in different public places and just berate her for even thinking of moving. They were trying to keep us under their control.
Wow. Praise God for your mum being so brave and just pushing through it and getting out, right? Because this is just, they're throwing all these handlers at her like, you're not leaving, staying here.
Yeah. And I have spent too much time talking about what I went through. We were supposed to talk about healing.
All good, all good. Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, how, so once you guys escaped, how was it with like the memories coming up? And obviously, like, I'd love to just ask about like your journey with remembering with Jesus, because I know that he's been very prominent in your whole
Yeah.
your whole story, but like also in just your remembering and processing of memories, because I know that will be really helpful for a lot of survivors that are newly remembering at the moment.
Right. Um, I didn't like Michigan at all. And so I left and took off on my own at the age of 20. My father followed them out. He appeared on the scene out there right after I left. So I missed him. They left me alone because I was expendable. So when I'm in my 30s, my older sister called me and she said, "Do you remember what happened when mom was in the hospital having our baby sister?" I can remember we had matching blue pajamas and dad got really mad at me and threw me on the couch. I said, "Oh no, I don't remember that." So you give it a few hours and I wake up, I have the full memory of what happened. He had thrown her on the couch to rape her. I had run and hidden in the closet in the playroom, peed my pants. I was so scared from her screams and everything. And this started talking back and forth on the phone. We'd unlock each other's memories. I don't remember. Okay, I don't remember that. And then a few hours later, we'd have the whole memory. That particular time, there was so much trauma because he fired the people that were supposed to be watching us for the weekend while my mom was in the hospital with a complicated breech birth. So she had to stay in a while with the baby. He fired them, and him and his buddies raped us the whole weekend. I mean, abused us. We had one laundromat in town, and my father would never buy like good things like washers and dryers to have at home. And so we went to this laundromat, but they were friend. It was one of his buddies that owned the laundromat. So after hours, they terrorized us at that laundromat with different things. And one of the police officers, I was 4 years old. One of the police officers that raped me he lives 15 miles from me right now. And it's really hard to not go and confront him. But what I know is this: he's a very, very high Freemason, very wealthy for being a retired cop. And as I told you, they had their own pedophile production company going on. The police did. So anyhow, that's part of healing, is to not take matters into your own hands, especially when you've been trained to take people out. And, the truth is, I have to tell that part of me that's not the way to get justice, So anyhow, that's a current hardship that I deal with every day, knowing he's just down the highway. But it was this back and forth with my sister, that we were remembering all these things. And then all of a sudden one day I had this vision that I was in a galley of a ship with a trap door in a storm. And somebody opened that door to the ship, deck, and all the water filled with fish and all this stuff just came and, washed me away. And that's what happened. All my memories flooded back at the same time to make me go crazy. And fortunately,
And
I realized
that's a deliberate thing in programming as well.
It's a deliberate thing.
Overwhelm survivors. Yeah. Oh, how scary.
And I had gone to my pastor at my church for help with remembering. First, I remembered my father was an alcoholic abuser. Then I remembered some sexual abuse. This is before getting the SRA and MK stuff back. And so I had gone through counseling kind of as an adult, looking back on, how do I deal with this stuff? I was never had flashbacks or anything like that. And I thought I was healed. I thought I was good. That was it, Oh, I was wrong. And I went to my pastor.
There's more.
Oh, well, I went to my pastor for help, and he wasn't equipped, number one, to deal with DID. I went through a couple deliverances that I needed to go through, obviously, but um, he just, especially with the sexual abuse, he just was not equipped to tell me to coach me the right way, and he had no idea what to do. And so I went to a therapist that was a family therapist, but he was willing to take me on as a client. He was a Christian man, PhD. This was at when we remembered I had contacted Dale Griffiths because my family was still being victimized in Michigan and Dale lived in Ohio. He was the top cult expert in the United States at the time. I contacted him and say, we're having all these memories. My sisters are their houses are being broke into. They got needle marks and all this stuff. And he got back to me. And so we opened an investigation, at least in the Midwest, for my father with Dale. Dale had FBI contacts and everything. Opened that investigation. And I got with this therapist, and Dale helped him connect to Valerie Wolf and Barb Seabury, who were expert therapists at the time in the United States. Valerie Wolf actually had two of her clients testify before Congress on MK Ultra abuses. And so my therapist was willing to learn from them how to treat me.
Oh, so good to hear that. You found someone that
Yeah.
wanted to learn.
And my church kicked me out, and I've been shunned in this town since. So it's been 25 years since I got kicked out of that church. My husband took the church aside. My husband took the church aside and has stayed with them ever since. And I was also going through nursing school at the same time. I mean, here I was a wife, mother of three, nursing school, and all the memories coming back all at the same time.
Your husband walks out as well.
And yeah, he was physically present, but the marriage essentially ended then. He was physically in the house, but he would leave me. Like, I had trouble with cutting, and one of my alters wanted to smoke and drink, and that wasn't me. I'd never smoked cigarettes, I thought. Yeah. And he left me. He would leave the house and take the kids if I was in a really bad place, which I wanted him to take the kids, over to grandma and grandpa's. But I needed him to come back and be with me, because here I had slits going down, I'm bleeding down my arms. Right. And no, he never came back. He just, he didn't deal with it.
So it's so sad that I guess there's just so many unhealed people in the world that they just literally can't face up to, the horrors of what has happened in things like ritual abuse and mind control. I'm so sorry to just hear how alone you were. That's awful.
Yeah.
Alone with three children, if that's possible, but
Yeah. The kids helped me break the cigarette habit. They found me smoking, and they were like, "You need to flush those right now down the toilet," and so I did. And I didn't, because I live for my kids. I mean, they were my most precious blessing, and I didn't know how much till I got the memories back of my first two babies, right? And so anyhow, and God was so gracious to me, because number one, this therapist I just picked out of the blue because he was on my insurance. Well, God had already orchestrated that it would work out, that he would be such a man of integrity, and a Christian man that we could pray that he would learn and help me get through this. I hear other survivor stories, and how many therapists they go through time after time after time. I mean, I was sent to like a psychiatrist by him to see if there's any meds that could help stabilize some of the, extreme emotions that I was going through. And she called me a liar. And if there hadn't been like big boulders in the parking lot in front of her nice plate glass windowed office, I would have driven my car. Really would have driven my car into the front of that. So thank God for the boulders.
I just wonder how many of those therapists and psychologists that say those kind of things are actually programmed by the networks to say them to trigger survivors, and how many are just completely naive and indoctrinated by the system. I guess only God knows, but I would say a lot of them are actually placed assets there just to really trigger survivors. They're so desperate to get help. And imagine going to therapy because you're just like, I need help with this so much, and then being called a liar, or that it's not true. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Or, I needed to be on, she also said I needed to be on antipsychotic medication. So I got up and walked out.
Well done.
And yeah, and didn't drive my car through the plate glass window. But the one emotion I couldn't have as a child was anger.
Yeah.
I was the depressed, weeping, weak. I was always so weak, and my real personality, I'm very strong and I'm very outgoing, and I set a goal and I accomplish it. I was going to college for my third career when this all came down. I was going to nursing school. And nursing school, the timing was perfect because I started realizing the magnitude of the injuries I had suffered that I had no memory for. And when I had my primary doctor do x-rays, it was incomprehensible that I was looking at my own body because I had no stories to tell me, no memories of all the all the old fractures, my face smashed, everything else. So much damage. And anyhow, in the recovery, what I did was before I started that therapy, I took a vacation and I went back to Southern California where I grew up because I'm having all these memories of places I had never been. And I walked into these places, and those were those living color nightmares or dreams that I talked about. Some weren't nightmares, but here were these inside these places. Obviously, I'd been there. And
it's like your subconscious was trying to tell you all
yeah,
the time. And I find like that happens a lot with me, is I'll dream something repeatedly, and then the memory will come through, and the memory won't be exactly what the dream was, but it was almost like subconsciously it was just preparing my brain for it, like, just remember this part of your life, and then the memory will come through 2 weeks
here's
later.
the setting. It's coming, you
Yeah.
know. But me and Jesus have always been tight. I had a faith, I that the Holy Spirit in me would leak through, like I said, in those rituals. No matter what churches did to me, I always had Jesus, and I had the Holy Spirit within me, and I had strong faith, and I heard the voice of God. And people go, how do you know it's not voice to skull technology and the voice of God? Which is a valid question, right?
Yeah.
Um, where the Holy Spirit talks, it's like more from your inner core
You feel it.
rather than up
Yeah.
here. Now, the other thing about me that's interesting is I have Jose Delgado's stemosiever embedded in the right wing of my sphenoid bone, which is behind my right eye here. He put it in when I was 5 by, popping my eye out, and at that age, the bone is cartilage, so it's pliable. So it's just inserting the device, pulling back out, putting my eye back in, and then they did other experiments. It was at Edgewood Arsenal Hospital in Maryland, and they did other experiments. But I've got this device, and after the head injury x-rays and stuff that we did, of course, you do an MRI because I was having horrific migraines. I mean, to the point of hospitalization migraines. And they did an MRI, and lo and behold, here's this stimoceiver.
Yeah.
I do have it too, sitting over here. Let me see. So that's the stimoceiver. But
What sort of
and
size was it, Cheryl? Like, what was the diameter on it?
okay, so these are centimeters right here. So it's only like it's about the size of a US dime, about 2.5 centimeters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow. It's not exactly small, right?
well, 2.5 centimeters, it fit in the whole bone, so to speak. It's totally encased in bone now. And it looked, this picture, here we go. That's what it looked like on the MRI, exactly, with all these features and all the features inside, exactly the same.
Today we're talking about all of this technology being tested and, for the first time experiments of it being used in animals, etc. And the truth is, all of these chips and technology being put into people's brains, etc., has been done for decades with generational children. And there's so many survivors that can speak on that.
Yeah, I had a friend in Canada that had the same implant done in Canada by the same doctor, of course. The only difference was he was trying to remote control behavior with this device. It doesn't have a battery. It just receives radio signals.
Please.
But the animals that he experimented on had rods going up the middle of their head and then a box on top of their head to receive the signal.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't do that right with the kids. You can't put a box on their head, and so the experiment was a failure as far as being able to remote control behavior. I got a hold of his book. And part of the healing is I really tell people research yourself.
Yeah. Truth is a huge healer, right? So
Start talking about stuff. Research yourself. Go back to these places if you can and see what's there. Be safe about it. Have a partner watching your back. Which my sister-in-law came along with me to these places and watched my back. But research if and if it's true, you'll find the evidence of, yeah, this place. I found I went to the library and went back on the microfiche that they stored stuff on and found out that they did indeed have an army hangar at the airport in Carlsbad for helicopters. And I had been trained after 12 years old. When they didn't sacrifice me, they put me into a helicopter and taught me to be a helicopter pilot.
Wow.
And a secret code courier. So anyhow, research yourself to see if things line up or not. Talk to family members that can validate you, that are safe. And that was nice. Was we all, for even my mom, got memories back of things and could say, different. There was my little sister who said she witnessed her being programmed to not see our bruises and injuries and things like that. It would just not register as something she even saw.
That makes so much sense.
I thought, unfortunately, I thought she was the stupidest woman on the planet, when I was a child, because number one, she stayed with my father. And there were a couple times when he would get drunk and really violent that we left. And we'd hide out in these different places, and I never wanted to go back, and she'd always go back. She'd always go back. How stupid can you be? But it wasn't stupidity, it was programming.
Yeah, that's it. Wow.
So
I was going to ask you, Cheryl, as well. You mentioned before about the spinning altars that you come across as you were remembering. And I found that very interesting. And I found that come up for a lot of survivors, is that before they get to a memory, or just as they're sort of approaching that amnesia barrier, they'll get nausea, go into spinning, or say if something's just too scary, it freaks them out, they'll go into spinning. And I know that you have actually uncovered like how that was programmed into you. So I thought that would be amazing to share for everyone.
Okay, they will literally spin you to put a spin programming. So think of different ways you might spin a child. For instance, a rope hanging from a tree was tied around my ankles and they wound me up and they'd spin me. They actually in MK Ultra had like a human roulette wheel that they could power and spin a whole bunch of the kids at the same time. And what they put that in for is when something is said to you that so jolts your present reality, doesn't make sense whatsoever, that programming will kick in to disorient you. And the one I share the most is I'm pregnant with what I believe is my first child, my daughter. And I'm 6 months pregnant, and there's a substitute doctor examining me for this 6 month checkup. And he does the checkup and he starts lambasting me for saying this is my first pregnancy.
Wow.
You should never lie to your doctor. You know, what are you doing lying to us? You know, and instantly that spin programming, I can't even remember everything he scolded me because that spin program hit in. And it's just like spinning vertigo if you've ever had it. I mean, it's literally the room is just spinning. You're nauseous, sudden, intense migraine type headache. And I just started weeping, you know, and I started dry heaving, of course. And the nurse grabbed this guy's arm and pulled him aside and said something to him. And I'm trying to breathe and not throw up. And you know, and he comes back. He says, "I'm so sorry for upsetting you. I know it was a traumatic birth." He didn't say he didn't thought it was. He knew it was a traumatic birth. Well, I had problems delivering the boy, and they had attempted to do like a spinal epidural on me, but he wasn't an anesthesiologist, so that was horrible. Um, Anyhow, I had some tremendous scarring from that particular birth, and my normal doctor assigned to me never told me anything was amiss, you know. And so yeah, he apologized and said, you know, I know you probably have so many emotions and stuff and you don't want to look at it again, but you always need to be honest with your doctor. And he completed, you know, talking to me because I was incoherent at that point.
Yeah.
And I made it down the stairs to the bathroom, you know, threw up, did, you know, all that, but everything is still spinning. I can't grab any thought. I really don't know where I am. I knew I was at a doctor's. I knew I was in the lobby downstairs, but I didn't know what city I was in. I mean, I had no bearings whatsoever. And I had to sit in that lobby for 2 hours. And the migraine is just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I had to sit there until I knew where I was, that I drove here in a car, what my car was, and figured out, I remembered how to get home after that appointment. That's how intense the spin programming is, and that it's supposed to spin you away from
The truth.
whatever caused that friction between the programming and your present reality. You know, the nurse said, you know, a miscarriage, but he said birth. And the nurse was trying to change the wording and everything. And so I'm thinking, oh, you know, that one time I was late, maybe I had a miscarriage, you know, trying to make it reason. But yeah.
You just went into shock, right? Like you just could not process that at all. Wow.
Right, right. How could I possibly, what are you talking about? You know? So yeah, that's a spin program, and those will kick in anytime somebody says something that resonates with your soul and spirit in your subconscious there, but you have no recollection of. So, because I didn't remember, I was 24 when I was pregnant with my daughter in marriage, and hadn't remembered yet. The other thing with my daughter was I had this intense fear that she would be kidnapped. I wouldn't even leave her with with her grandmother when she was really small. And that was because my first daughter was kidnapped and taken from me, ripped right out of my arms. Um, and then, of course, I didn't think I could even have sons because my mom couldn't have sons. And everybody said I was just like my mom. So I was shocked that I could, have a son. And then I was deathly afraid he was going to die, immediately. So your body's always, you and I know, and most survivors know that trauma is held in every cell of your body, and it'll make you remember.
Yeah. But it's
Anyhow,
such a great explanation what you just said about the spinning altars. And I think, if people can understand, like, these are like parts of your brain that have literally
yes,
split off by
yes,
trauma. So, when we're talking about parts and dissociation, it's just the mind has been through such an extreme trauma, in this case by spinning repetitively. It's actually just pocketed itself. So like that whole memory from that time is put into another part of the brain. But in programming, it can be used towards things like this. So that nausea, that spinning feeling, it's dissociation basically, can be brought up to protect the programming. And I know, Cheryl, you were able to integrate those altars as well. So I'd love you to share your process of doing that with Jesus.
right. The spinners were actually fragments. They weren't. And what I saw, I see the altars in my mind's eye, right? And so what I saw was this whole hillside with little girls with their arms out, spinning in circles until they fell down. Then they get back up and spin some more. Those were the spinners, and their only job was to do the spin programming. So they came together as when I saw that, they came together as one real fast and then just moved on in. So this is how we set up my healing. Um, my therapist told me to picture in my mind a safe place where every altar, excuse me, after they've told their story, can go and be safe. Well, there was no place on earth to me at that time that felt safe, so I created a hacienda in the sky, so to speak, on clouds, with angels holding up this cloud, right? And Jesus could come back and forth to this hacienda. There was a jacuzzi like pool out front where the dirty, hurting, bleeding altars could come wash off. The angels would bring them there, wash off. And then I had this thing for what I've always had this thing in my life. I wanted clean white shoes and dresses and things like that. So all my altars got a little flannel white nightgown and a little matching panties and little ballet slippers to go into the white hacienda where they had a downy white room with a canopy bed. Everything was white, where they could, most of them were tired, so they could go to bed. And there was a kitchen where angels were making chicken noodle soup. And so we set up this place, and what happened was we took turns. Every altar would tell all their trauma to the therapist. We go back through it. We bring Jesus into the picture. And he'd say, okay, now let's look around and let's find Jesus in the room or the forest or whatever and see what he has to say to you. And so usually, most of the time, he would just pick me up and cry with me.
That's something that generational children have never really experienced either. So that's just so healing for those parts as well. Oh, bless.
Exactly. And, he's always holding me and telling me he loved me and it wasn't my fault and things like that. And then we'd go, and the altar would go to the safe place. And like I said, most of them were tired. Most of them wanted to go to bed because you're so exhausted all the time from being kept up through the nights and then having to go to school and all that kind of stuff. And once in this safe place, I had all the white in the back, but once you went in, it was fun. I also have a thing for log cabins. I love log cabins. So the foyer living room area was like a log cabin with a big fireplace. And um, when the altars had got rested, and they would congregate in that living room, and then Jesus would come in and have conversations, and you'd see like older altars rocking the little baby altars, and just we just have discussions in there. I had the word of God in me when I was a child. I read through the Bible probably, I don't know, at least 3 times, if not more. Um, and that's not to brag. It's just I was just voracious for the Word of God. Um, I also need to mention that I tested out of English when I was in 8th grade. I never had to take it in high school because I tested as a graduate of college in my reading comprehension. So
Wow.
it's not to brag. That's just to give people a frame of reference that, yes, I did read through the Bible and I had sections memorized and things like that. And so sometimes sitting in that living room, there'd be discussions about what did this mean in the Bible and things like that. And then for the little ones, Jesus would come. There was a grassy hillside. The little ones would go on the grassy hillside and roll down the hill with Jesus like logs. And he would do it too, and we all laughing and playing and things like that. That's where integration started to take place. It started getting empty in that hacienda, and it was littles coming together the same age. Like I had Cheryl 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 5 years old, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So they all became Cheryl 5. And then Cheryl 5, it was basically talking to my altars and saying, look, you were told to do a specific thing and you did that. You did a good job. But now you get to give up a job and be a child and just play or go to sleep. Wouldn't you like to do that? And it was always yes. And so they would choose that. And then I would say, okay, you're part of me. We have the same name. And wouldn't you just like to have an adult take over for you? Yes. And, and they'd come, they'd give me a big hug, and then they'd be a part of me.
Mm,
Now,
beautiful, because they were ready then to come home.
yeah,
Yeah.
to give up their jobs. I learned this from Valerie Wolf, who was a leading, MK Ultra therapist.
Awesome.
She said, always tell the altar they've done a great job at, even if they're holding a knife, scaring you. Hey, you've done a really good job of holding that knife and scaring me. But guess what? You don't have to do that job anymore. And she got herself out of a bad situation by just saying that. And they put the knife down and wanted to go color in the coloring books,
It's that reassurance, isn't it? And these are little children that we're dealing with such horrific violence and abuse and trauma. It's just it's a survival thing. So yeah, I think the fact that they've been able to hold that memory, that trauma, and keep us safe until we've been ready. So, I mean, even now, like, and I'm sure you can agree with this, Cheryl, it can be so hard at our age now to process the memory of what a 4 or 5 year old child endured. Like, there is no way that that child would have been able to process that and live. So they've done an incredible job, these parts of holding that until we've been ready to see it and to heal it and to integrate it. So yeah, I love that. What a beautiful process.
And you're going to have contrary altars too. ones that know better than you and don't want to integrate and things like that. For those ones, I wrote contracts with them. Look, if you, dear, we'll say, Charlie, dear Charlie, you're really good at, cussing people out and smoking cigarettes and becoming the smoke and letting the perpetrators abuse you so they don't abuse the little ones. You're a real hero, and I love your personality. But if we combine our forces and work together, since I'm an adult and you're still a teenager, if we combine together, we'll be even stronger. And there was given, I did a right hand, left hand, dominant hand versus non-dominant hand writing sometimes back and forth with alters to get to that mutual agreement point where we could come to an agreement and see that our ultimate goal was to survive whatever trauma they did to us for me to create that altar. And the one key to my rapid healing at home was I finally got it from head knowledge to soul knowledge that I created every altar. They didn't create some altar out here and put it in my brain. They gave me a narrative, usually under sensory deprivation and torture and all that stuff. And I was the one who created the altar to survive that situation. And when I realized everything in my head was my creation and they just gave me the script for it, then all of it, there was just tons of spontaneous integration.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
basically, started my therapy to the end was 3 years. And that was real intensive outpatient therapy. And I'd write emails to my therapist in between seeing him and everything else, and he was just always there for me. He was a really good man. So
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for just explaining that process with reintegrating parts. And I love it's like a conversation, like forming a friendship again, because you haven't been able to be in contact for so long. So what a great way of writing a contract and going back and forward and negotiating and basically finding a way forward together after being separated for so long. It's a really beautiful way of doing it. So yeah, I could talk to you all afternoon, Cheryl. You've got so much to share. So thank you for your time. And is there any last words you would like to share with the survivors before we close off?
You're wonderful. You're strong. You created every piece of your being. So you have the power to bring it all back together. It takes some negotiation. It takes prayer. But you can do it. And people say, well, God never gave you more than you could handle. Well, yes, he did actually give you more than you can handle. And that's why you're supposed to handle it with him. And so if you just ask, he'll answer and be there for you. So you're not alone. You're strong and you're more than a conqueror. And I'm proud of you.
Oh, that's beautiful, Cheryl. And yeah, just hearing from survivors lately, probably more so over the last 6 months, there is such incredible miracles of healing happening. Like I'm seeing
Yes.
people move through things just so fast, and Jesus is just so present to assist us with that reintegration. So yeah, let's just all pray for miracles of healing, and we're seeing it every week. So thank you so much, Cheryl, for all you do and for being such a prominent voice in the survivor community. Like I know that hearing your story, even before I started remembering, it definitely was a huge comfort. As I was remembering, I was like, I can do this. So God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you so much.